Welcome again to today's panel discussion, the intersection of telemedicine, essential tremor, and the Cala Trio therapy. My name is Debbie Donovan, and I'm the Director of Market Development for Healthcare Professionals at Cala Health. It is my honor to host today's session. So let's start with a practice question. So if we could have the first poll question come up, and the first poll question is, how did you first hear about Cala Trio therapy? You can see your answers here. It's always interesting to see how patients or how physicians have heard or healthcare professionals have heard about the Cala Trio. We've had a couple of things that we've done directly to patients, but we've also had many things that we've done for physicians as well. So we can see that email is turning out to be a very good way in this day and age, in the COVID times. We certainly are seeing email working quite well, so that's good. So one of the things I wanted to, I'd been researching this particular aspect, this topic for quite some time, and this quote jumped out at me. And it was because, you know, we're in a very interesting and in a lot of ways very difficult time in this country and around the world, and there's some very interesting silver linings. And one of the silver linings is the accelerated adoption of telemedicine. And we're just having to move faster. I happen to be friends with some people that work at Google, and I can tell you that they've been working diligently to try to update and advance the features available for Google Meet, which is just one of many platforms that we're all using and becoming very familiar with. So now let me go ahead and introduce our panel today. So first we have Dr. Cala, who is an attending neurologist practicing at the Hines VA Hospital just outside of Chicago, Illinois. She's an assistant professor of neurology at Loyola University Medical Center. And in addition, she's the director of National VA Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Center Consortium Center. And these are called PADRACs. And she's at the Hines VA, but she's also the co-chair of the Movement Disorder section at Hines VA. Dr. Yasser Torres-Yaghi is the Director of Parkinsonism and Dementia Clinic at MedStar Georgetown. He is an integral clinical research member of the Georgetown Translational Neurotherapeutics Program. And this is a venture that fuses basic preclinical neuroscience and clinical research and is dedicated to advancing disease detection and therapeutics for movement disorders and neurodegenerative diseases. Dr. Olga Wallen is a fellowship-trained movement disorder neurologist practicing at Houston Methodist Neurological Institute, assistant professor of neurology at Will Cornell Medical College, and an adjunct assistant professor at Texas A&M College of Medicine. And Dr. Wallen, thank you so much. I know that there's a lot of rain in your neck of the woods right now, so thank you so much for staying on the line with us today. So let's start with our first topic, and that is that telemedicine got its moment on March 1st, 2020. Both the new and established patients were now allowed to be seen by physicians because of a Medicare waiver, number 1135, and it established that Medicare would be paying for telemedicine appointments, both video and audio, without the restrictions that they had typically had in the past. So let's go to the first poll question. And it relates specifically to this notion of seeing new patients versus seeing existing patients only. Which type of patients have access to telemedicine appointments? And so while you all are answering the question, I would like to ask our panelists. Dr. Wallen, what is one of the things that, how have they reacted to this shift in telemedicine? How have they responded to this?
A lot of our older patients were a little bit apprehensive and concerned about using something new, especially new technology. However, after they tried at least once, they realized how easy and convenient it can be to communicate with their doctors through telemedicine. So after trying once, none of them had any issues after that.
That's great. And Dr. Cala, tell us how your patient base reacted to this shift.
So really at the VA, we have been directed to only see about 25% in visits. So most of our visits are being done virtually now. And most of our patients, it was a little bit touch and go to begin with, but then as time went on, they got very comfortable with it. And most of them were very easy to coach as in terms of where to place the camera, how to show their tremor the best. So really it's been quite helpful at the VA, and a lot of our patients are getting very used to it. So it's been wonderful.
Great. So Dr. Torres-Yagi, tell us about what some of your patients, you had an interesting experience with some of your patients.
Yeah, so, we had always wanted to start telemedicine, and really what invigorated that process was everything that's happened with the pandemic environment. We found it tricky in many cases. We had some patients that were more readily able to get on technological platforms, but early on we had our own kind of embedded electronic medical record telemedicine platform, which we were trying to disseminate to all of our patients. It became hard in many cases for patients to do that. It wasn't until a few weeks in that we relied on advocacy group webinars to disseminate some of that education about how it is to use the different platforms, how it is to engage in ways that Dr. Coletta and Dr. Wallen were saying over telemedicine. It was new for a lot of our patients. Their support groups became very important. They also mobilized. Our patient support groups mobilized to teach their participants about telemedicine. It really was a tricky time for us, but once everyone was educated and learned, it became almost second nature. Now I'm seeing more patients in follow-up, and that time to boot up and get connected is going down and down. One more point was that it takes a lot of coordination between office staff, administrative support, our fellows and residents, our attendings, a lot of different moving parts that kind of have to synergize and work together. We were able to get that up and running.
Great. So let's go ahead and show the answer to the poll and how everyone responded to that. So both new and established patients, that's the majority, which is wonderful. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next subsection. And just a real quick check with our audience. I'm really interested to see what platforms are you using. So we have that poll question. We're going to put that up. And while we ask this, I'd like Dr. Wallen, could you talk about what it was like for you about getting that technology up and running at Methodist?
It was actually easy. Prior to pandemic, we were ready to start, but for some reason we did not start. We just needed a kick. We just needed to push. So our EMR platform was set and ready to offer video visits, but only after all our in-person visits were canceled due to the pandemic, we actually started using it.
Great. And Dr. Coletta, the VA, do you have a special system that you use?
Yeah, so we have a system called BVC, and BVC was actually in use prior to the pandemic, and other services were using it. I know it was being heavily used in psychiatry and some of the other services in our hospital, but the neurology service, for some reason, had not really, gone into that endeavor until COVID. So once we were going to do some telemedicine visits, it took us about 2 to 3 months to get everybody on the training we needed and everything to be set in place. Was extremely easy for both us as practitioners and our patients as well. The system is set up well where basically they just click on a link and they're guided through the process. We're able to see them on video pretty well. We can actually see pretty real-time evidence of their movement disorders, which is key, especially when evaluating someone with tremors. So we were lucky at the VA that we have a good system in place for telemedicine visits.
Great. Dr. Torres-Yagi, tell us about what your situation was like.
Yeah, so, we had always wanted to do telemedicine, and finally we were able to do it because of what we discussed earlier. And we tried, using our integrated EHR platform. We would do anything. Our point overall has always been access. How do we improve patient access, communication, education? We didn't want things to fall apart within our practice because of the COVID pandemic. We wanted to stay connected. And so we would do anything. And a lot of the times it's very much, connecting is very much based on how the patient is able to get on a platform. So if FaceTime may have worked, or if something may have worked that a patient was used to, we would do what was better for the patient, in addition to what was good and what worked for us in terms of our EHR. Phone calls would work sometimes, if it's something that we didn't necessarily need to see the patient for, but we would always try our best to get on a video visit because we wanted to make that encounter as valuable and as beneficial for the patient.
Great. So let's take a look and see what the poll said. And it looks like it's a nice mix here of integrated systems and off-the-shelf, and even to Dr. Torjagi's point, just going and doing the old iOS FaceTime, meeting the patients where they are. So let's talk a little bit about some of kind of the volume trends that we've seen here. A colleague of mine sent this to me, and obviously we see this giant bulge of new telemedicine appointments in the, March, April timeframe. And then things have started to settle down. Now, of course, this data is ending at June, which we all thought things were starting to look good. And obviously the rest of the summer has not gone as we all planned. So our poll question to the audience at large is, what is the data or what's your sense of your department? And are these trends that you're seeing right now? And so for our panelists, what I'd like to do is ask them about some of the unexpected roller coaster ride that's been associated with movement disorders. So Dr. Torjagi, talking about your little roller coaster, some of the ups and downs.
As is anything, change can be difficult. And so that was, we had to pivot, right? And that's what this whole time frame has been about, pivoting, how it is that we can continue to be there for our patients despite everything. And so the way we did that was we didn't want our patient volume to go down. We wanted to be able to continue to reach our patients. So what we did was we mobilized our staff, our administrative services, mobilized our fellows, residents, anything we could use, Sometimes a lot of the day would be on us as attendings, but we would just continue to kind of get through our day as best we could. What we learned was that actually we were able to improve access. We actually saw an increase of about 30% in terms of our ability to reach patients and productivity. And so this really showed us that actually, this virtual way of connecting might actually be very helpful in so many of our patients. Another quick thing that we did was, rather than think about, our 3 to 6 month follow-ups, we said, well, if we're going to start a new medicine or think about something, let's stay connected. Maybe in about 2 to 4 weeks, we can do a quick check-in now that you know how to use the platform. And so we follow patients now more longitudinally maybe than we did before.
Right. That's a very good point. Dr. Coletta, with the VA patient base, tell us about their ups and downs with this.
So I would absolutely have to agree with Dr. Torres-Yagi in that, our productivity increased. We're able to follow them a little bit better and a little bit closer. But one of the unexpected kind of pluses from this is that a lot of our patients live far away. And it really is a taxing effort for them to get to the hospital, especially movement disorder patients, Parkinson's and things of that nature. It really is a taxing effort. And patients that lived, 60 miles away or so were telling us how much they enjoy these virtual visits because we gleaned all the information that we needed from the virtual visit, but they were in the comfort of their own home. And they've even told me, several times, like, we'd like to continue with this platform because it's so much easier. It's not as taxing. It's not as, of a drudgery to get out of the house and get rest and everything. So really our patients have been very pleased with this system, and as have we, because like I said, we can glean most of our exam from a telemedicine visit. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And I do think that this is the wave of the future, and I see us using this much more in the future.
That's great. Dr. Wallen, tell us a little bit about your ups and downs.
I also want to mention one big advantage of evaluating telemedicine patient with tremor or in-person visit. We all know that patients with essential tremor often have task-specific that specific component of tremor. For example, tremor can be more severe while performing certain tasks. For example, using certain tools or certain household items that I do not have in my office. So therefore, I often see that the patient gets upset that when he or she comes to my office, they cannot show me how bad their tremor is at home. So, and while interacting with patients through telemedicine visit, I can see them at home. They can show me the difficulty doing certain tasks. They can show me those tools they have difficulty using. And I feel that patient feels almost like comforted that finally doctor can see and appreciate impact of tremor on their lives.
Oh, that's great. So let's go ahead and show the poll question that we have been running here. And so it looks like most people aren't really sure about their volume, and this is probably something you want to check out with your administrators to see how you're doing in that regard, how efficient you're being. So let's move on to advocacy. So we know that telemedicine was granted, as we said, under a special waiver, but it's got to stick, right? And so I wanted to point out to everyone on the call that the AAN had a few days where they talked about Speak Up for Cala Health, and they have recently issued a statement to CMS saying that they would, this is their pitch to keep telemedicine and remove the restrictions and keep those in place so that we don't go back to the olden days before the pandemic times. And I think this is a really big deal. So what I would like to ask our panelists to discuss here is look ahead a little bit and, tell me what you think, what's your future hope? The genie's out of the bottle. And Rob Williams, you can't put that genie back in. So, what do we hope is going to happen? So let's start with Dr. Coletta.
So as I mentioned, I think, like we said, this is really the wave of the future. And I hope that telemedicine does stick around because for ease of use for the patients and, like I said, not having to deal with, getting into a car and through the VA, they have beneficiary travel. And a lot of times the transportation isn't there on time. So they don't come to my appointments on time or things of that nature. So we're always running behind. And it's just nice to know that they have this ability in the comfort of their own home to get evaluated by us, on a level that is sufficient. And I really think that it will carry us through in the future. And, especially when in terms of Cala Trio too, when you think about it, evaluating patients, virtually, we have the ability to offer them a treatment that, really does have, it's not pharmacologic, so there's no side effects from it. And it's nice to know that our patients that have comorbidities where, a lot of times our hands are tied when it comes to what medications we can prescribe because they have so many other comorbidities. It's nice to know that we have a device that is a wearable that can actually improve their quality of life immensely. And I think that, with the telemedicine interface, I think this is going to really be helpful for a lot of our patients.
Great. Dr. Wallen, I'd like you to comment a little bit. What are your hopes for the future, especially for some of those older patients that you see?
I do think that telemedicine is here to stay. It will not eliminate in-person visits, especially in movement disorders neurology. We do have to evaluate patients, including muscle tone, something that we cannot do through telemedicine. However, for many patients, new and established patients, it can be a very convenient way to stay in touch with physicians, adjust medications. For older people, obviously, it can eliminate the stress of coming to the big city, like I'm working in Houston, and a lot of our patients, they have to come here, they have to ride or drive a car for an hour. So for older patients, it's stressful. So telemedicine can eliminate this stress on our patients' lives. For younger patients, it's convenient. They don't have to spend few hours or waste few hours of their day to come and see a doctor. They can do it from the convenience of home. Now for homeschooling parents, that's big benefit, obviously, or they can use their lunch break to have doctor's appointments. So younger patients will also benefit from telemedicine.
Great. Dr. Torziagi, what are some of your visions for the future of this situation?
Yeah, so I think, telemedicine, as we said, I would like to see it become part of our clinical practice. I'd like us also to evolve with technology. So as movement disorder specialists, this idea of being able to connect with patients in some sort of hybridized form with in-person visits and telemedicine appointments finding a way to make it work becomes very important, especially when we're talking about our patient population. When we heard a lot about our Parkinson's patients and movement disorders. A lot of the times our essential tremor patients might be on the younger end in comparison to a lot of the patients we see. They might be more readily able to join on telemedicine platforms, have conversations. They might be more savvy when it comes to some of the technology, at least based on their age. And then telemedicine itself, being able to connect through technology, might just be a symbol that technology is going to help us. Just like we said, Dr. Coletta said, this is a non-pharmacologic intervention when we think of Cala Trio. And when we're trying to help our patients, we have to use different methods, just like we use combination therapies in many cases. We'll use a hybrid-like approach for telemedicine and in-person visits. And we might have to use non-pharmacologic therapies like Cala Trio to provide that best care.
Great. So that actually offers us an opportunity. We have a little quick LinkedIn poll that's running right now on LinkedIn if you happen to see it. Go ahead and we will move on from here. And the next thing that we wanted to cover is just a really quick transition over to the PROspect study that was published. We previously had 2 randomized controlled trials that were published, and just the last few weeks we've had tremor and other hyperkinetic movements published PROspect. And like I mentioned before, we have a video that summarizes this data. This is an open access publication, so you can read the entire paper. But I'd actually like our panelists, and starting with Dr. Wallen, if you were one of the investigators, could you talk to us a little bit about how you feel now that this is published?
Well, yes, I was one of the investigators of this clinical trial, so that was very exciting. As you see, based on the results, it did show that Cala Trio can be quite effective treatment option. Interestingly, we know, those of us who work in clinical research, we know how difficult it might be to recruit patients for clinical trials. Patients are hesitant to try new medications. We had absolutely no problems recruiting patients for this study. So subjects are very excited about trying something that is not medication. So that was a pleasant surprise for our clinical team. So patients are really open to the idea of trying something non-pharmacological. And I see the same excitement now in patients already after Cala Trio became available, after the study is completed. So we have the same excitement of patients to try something that might be non-pharmacological, non-invasive. So actually the results of the study that we observed during the study, they are similar to what we are seeing now in actually clinical practice, clinical use of the device.
Oh, excellent. Dr. Torres-Yagi, you were actually working with Dr. Pagan while the study was going on. So if you could comment on your experience then and now.
Yeah, it's really impressive and really great to be able to see something come to fruition from clinical research to clinical practice. I've always thought that, what makes us better clinicians is, having one foot in research, and what makes us better researchers is having one foot in clinical practice. So it's kind of this approach that, because it's an ever-changing field, and that's the way I kind of educate our patients now about it. I talk about our experience with the clinical trial. I talk about the impressive data that we have to be able to help people. And the different components become ever so important to educate about. We talk about the clinical outcomes that change and improve with Cala Trio, but it's more than that. It's also the functional impact of those clinical outcomes, and then how that translates into quality of life, right? So all of those kind of components become important. Talking about the functional impact that a therapy can have really does help put that into the right perspective for the patient. So it's not just about the clinical tremor benefit that we see, it's about the quality of life changes and the different functional impacts, being able to hold things, for example, all the things that essential tremor can affect, telling them that those things that they are doing might be able to improve with a non-pharmacologic therapy does open their eyes. You can see kind of a surprised, very happily surprised look in patients' eyes when you say, oh, it's not a medicine, it's something different, and it's exciting.
And Dr. Coletta, once again, because you have a VA patient population, talk to us a little bit about how they have responded to this therapy now that they have access to it.
Absolutely. So I would have to echo what Dr. Torres-Yagi had said, and that whenever you mention a therapy that is non-pharmacologic, the patient's eyes totally light up. They just get very excited, thinking that there's something else that doesn't have, like I said, all of these side effects. And when you think about it, I think in the VA specifically, we do tend to have a population that tends to have a little bit more comorbidities than the general population. And in our patients, really, we are always looking for something that, again, is non-pharmacologic, that doesn't cause a lot of side effects, because they're already on a lot of medications to begin with. So, they come in with these long lists, and the last thing they want is to add another medication that's going to make them tired, that's going to make them confused or drowsy. And, as we know, some of the medications that we have aren't, the most effective, especially when it comes to essential tremor. So when, I speak to my patients, I offer them a wearable device, and they all are just so excited about the potential that it has. And really, like I said, from a clinician standpoint as well, I'm also very excited because I know that I'm not causing them any undue harm and not interacting with any of their other medications. So the VA population has been very, very welcoming of this new technology and are very excited to see where this goes.
That's great. Now we are going to do a mock telemedicine appointment, and we're going to walk through the prescription process. And so I'm going to be the patient, and I have 3 world-class movement disorder specialists who are going to help me to get my prescription. So we're going to start with Dr. Coletta, and she's going to mention a little bit what the process is like for prescribing at the VA, and she's going to ask me some questions.
Absolutely. So through the VA, the prescription process is a little bit different. There's a lot of work on the front end. And basically in that, you have to talk to your prosthetics department, and you have to coordinate with your Cala Trio rep. So between the two of them, there has to be a conversation behind the scenes when it comes to getting everything on board and getting them vendorized through the VA. So once they are vendorized and that entire process takes place and they're vetted by the VA system, then we can safely prescribe. So sometimes it's a little bit of legwork, but for the most part, it's in the hands of the prosthetics department and your Cala Trio rep. But once it gets approved, it's very simple. Basically, all we have to do is submit the form to the Cala Trio company. And on our end, we just submit the typical prosthetics request through our VA, documenting what hand, what size, and the tremor test that we're looking for. So once it's done, it's a very simple process. But Debbie, can you tell me a little bit about your tremor in terms of, is it both hands, and is it when you're doing things, eating, writing, does it interfere?
Yes, so I've noticed my tremor getting worse. It's kind of a family thing, and I notice the most, I'm left-handed, and I notice the most when I'm holding my phone, and it's driving me nuts. I can't do it. I need something for this.
Absolutely. Well, the good news is we do have something that can potentially help, and it is not a medication. So basically what it is a wearable device that looks like a watch, and basically what it does is it sends small stimulations through your wrist. And you wear this about twice a day, 40 minutes at a time typically. And the good thing about it is you can actually wear it before you do anything that you are trying to eliminate the tremor force in terms of eating, writing. If you're, doing any kind of task that you need to have a steady hand, use this beforehand. In terms of the contraindications, just make sure you don't have any kind of defibrillators, pacemakers, deep brain stimulators, anything of that nature. You do not have a diagnosis of epilepsy or anything of that, so we need to make sure about that as well. Good. And no pregnancy, you're not pregnant, correct? And the other, perfect. And the other thing is we want to make sure that you don't have any kind of marks on your skin or any kind of inflamed, swollen areas that you would want to put a stimulator over.
I got good skin. My skin is very good. So thank you.
Wonderful.
And yes, no, not pregnant, no brain surgeries. I have a cousin had brain surgery and she had epilepsy, but that's not something that I have in my immediate family. So that's not an issue at all. So it sounds like I'm eligible for this therapy then.
You are absolutely eligible, yes.
Cool. Dr. Wallen, now we have to fill out this prescription form. And so what do you need to know from me?
Okay. So dear patient Debbie, so we are going to fill out the prescription form, but first we need to decide what hand we are going to treat. I want to tell you that you cannot switch this device from one hand to another hand. You have to use it every time on the same hand. If you switch, it will not work. So you will need to decide what hand you want to treat. Tremor in what hand bothers you the most, right or left? Okay.
I'm left-handed, and it's definitely my left hand that makes me nervous because that's my dominant hand. So everything I do is with my left hand, and that really drives me crazy.
Therefore, we will order a device to treat your left hand tremor. Next, we will need to find a task that you will do to titrate stimulation intensity. Once you get your device, you will be guided through stimulation process, and we will have to use the same task. We will have to use certain tasks while we are looking for a stimulation intensity. So there are two tasks we can choose from. One would be your left arm in front of you in outstretched position. That's one task. Okay, let's see how bad your tremor is in this position. Or there's another task when you hold your hand under your chin, your elbow is flexed, almost like a wing beaten position. So let's see how bad your tremor is in this position. And it looks to me that your tremor is more severe when you hold your hand in this wing beaten position. So therefore, I will suggest we will use this position for your hand and your arm, this task, while we are going to titrate your device. We are going to order a device for your left hand, and we will be using a wing beaten task for titration of the device.
Got it. Okay. So now there's this fancy band, Dr. Torziagi, that has these very weird little electrodes in there. So what do we have to do with that?
Well, you got it. So when we talk about the actual how it is that we administer this therapy, it's so important to do it right. So one thing is understanding the wrist size. So we'll get to that in a moment, but we have to pick between a small, medium, or large Cala Trio device, because we want to stimulate the right part of the wrist so that we hit the right spot so that we're getting the most efficacious effect from the medicine, from the stimulation. And so what we need to talk about is, now that we're virtual, how are we going to make this work? And so we have many different ways that we can do this. One is, if you think about the actual treatment form or this special convenient measuring tool that can be done in office to determine your patient's band size, what we see here is we can use it, and all it's very simple. You said small, medium, and large. You pull on it, and you can see Debbie. Perfect. So you're right there. You're right in the middle. So if you went to Starbucks, you'd be a grande. So, you know, we have the different sizes. But what you see here is if you're a medium, then that's really what it means is that you're about a 16.5 centimeter to about 18.4 centimeter wrist. And so that determines to us that you do need a medium wrist band. And so that's the best way to do it. There's other ways that we can do it virtually. If you think about it, I know we're not in the same place, but if you have something handy next to you, is there anything that you have handy?
My mom always taught me to have a tape measure. So I have a tape measure. So I can measure, I can tell you what my measurement is in centimeters. And I am right there at the 16.4 centimeter mark for sure. Right?
Perfect.
So if I didn't have that tape measure, I do have this handy dandy cell phone cord, which I have like a gazillion of these floating around. So I can easily do this and mark the cell phone cord such that I can see, okay, that's where the mark is. And my kids have a ruler, good old fashioned hard ruler. So I can measure that too. And you know what? That one's also 16.4. So I'm really consistent here. But you know, I also have a printer at home, and I noticed that on the Cala Trio prescription form that there's a ruler here. So you would want me to put my arm into the form and measure it that way. Yeah? Like that?
That's perfect. That's what we do in office.
All right. So the reason why we did this little demonstration of how easy a Cala Trio appointment is, you can see that I had 3 great doctors ask me all these questions, and we did the whole thing in less than 10 minutes. Now, I had all my props ready to go, so we get that. This is certainly one of those things that your staff members could help you with. They have to call the patient in advance anyway, and they could probably walk them through this process as well as the physicians. So I get lucky because I have 3 world-class movement disorder specialists, so I get to have all of them help me. So that's great. So now what I'd like to do is let's open this up to having some additional questions from the audience, and to find out what is of interest, or is there any other questions that you guys in the audience have about Cala Trio, about movement disorders and telemedicine, and where these things intersect. Can the patient become refractory to stimulation? How does that play into the situation? Does the patient become refractory to stimulation? What is it about the afferent pattern stimulation that maybe works better than, how does that work? And I'll ask Dr. Torres-Yagi for that answer to that question.
Yeah, so what we can say right now is based very much on the clinical trials. And so what patients did in the PROspect study is they stimulated their wrist, and they did it over a 3-month period. And so what we do is have that information. And what we saw was that at the end of that duration of time, there was improvement, both clinical and from a quality of life scale. So right now, when we're educating and answering that question to patients, we say, well, this is the data that we have, and that's what we can present. One
of the questions that just came in was, is this an out-of-pocket cost, and is it covered by insurance? And so the answer is yes, this is an out-of-pocket cost. It is not yet covered by insurance, except in the case of the VA does pay for their subscribers or their beneficiaries to be on this therapy. So for everyone else, and that includes Medicare, we're working on getting what we need done. The device itself, the stimulator, is $3,200, and that there is a monthly payment plan for the band subscription. The bands are replaced once every quarter, but we've got that scheduled out as a monthly payment. So we have multiple payment plans for patients, and we know that not everyone, especially in this time, it may not be ready for them until we get insurance. We do have a 60-day money return guarantee in that if you were to sign up for the device and try it for 60 days and it doesn't work for you, you can return it, and there's just a $99 restocking fee. So yes, the patient can adjust their own stimulation from home, and that information is recorded, which actually leads to the next question that we got, which is, does the Cala Trio track data via accelerometer log, and can the provider review that? So right now, the answer to the question is yes, we are capturing that data, and we've had some really interesting papers and publications that are coming out, and we are looking at that data to figure out exactly, and that's actually part of my job right now, is to help give doctors like Dr. Coletta and Torres-Yagi and Wallen and all of you in the audience, we want to get to a point where we can show you what that data looks like, because we do believe that you'll be able to make some really important clinical decisions as you see how patients are using the device. We are very interested to get some feedback on that over time. So if there's something you're interested in, please contact your local Cala Trio field person, and they will have you get in touch with me if that's something that you're interested in. There was a comment here from Dr. Khemani, and that is, can someone use it for both hands? So the answer from a prescribing perspective is, it can be prescribed for the left hand and for the right hand, and our customer success team will help figure out how best to fulfill that prescription, but they do have to have 2 separate bands. And because they're definitely right and left in terms of how they deliver the energy. So I wanted to make sure I covered that question. We've got a couple of questions coming in. Does the device have to be prescribed by only MDs? or can occupational therapists prescribe the device in the VA system? Dr. Coletta, can you answer that?
So yes, so as of right now, I believe other VAs, occupational therapists, are able to prescribe, and I think that is something that we will extend to Hines as well. For right now, I am the sole prescriber, but I don't see why not, why not occupational therapists as well. Like I said, I know that I've heard in other VAs, occupational therapists are prescribing, so that should be something that you should be able to do through your own VA.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Here's a question. Again, it's an occupational therapist question, and I don't know if Dr. Coletta, if you're the right one, but we'll start with you. Can the Cala Trio be used at the same time as other eStim? For example, a person using a Halo Sport, lowercase t, capital DCS on the head as they practice occupational therapy or sports at home?
That's a great question. I'm not 100% familiar with that technology, I'm going to be honest. I would say just from, a stimulation standpoint, I would probably not use them together. But, like I said, I'm not 100% sure what the device is and what it does, but I just wouldn't use two stimulation devices together at the same time.
Yeah, and I'll addend my answer about using it on either hand. We don't recommend that they're used at the same time for that same reason. If you did end up needing it for both hands, you would use your left hand first, and then you would do right hand second, or vice versa. Dr. Torizyagi, you may know the answer to this. Did the trials used to acquire FDA approval include any patients who had essential tremor comorbid with another extrapyramidal process, such as basal ganglia ischemia, vascular insult, that could be contributing to or exacerbating the tremor? And if not, is there any contraindication for a person with comorbid ET and vascular tremor?
The simple answer is, based on the PROspective study, what we did was we included, when we were enrolling for the study, we included patients that had a simple diagnosis of essential tremor. And so right now the indication is for that. And so any other comorbid conditions that might be contributing to the overall, if there's a mixed tremor or if there's a tremor that could be due to multiple causes. Right now what we're doing is we're trying to use the information that we have from the PROspective study and the FDA indication, which is for essential tremor. So if they have a diagnosis of essential tremor, you can go ahead and use it in those patients.
Dr. Coletta, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the duration that a patient has used the device. Can the stimulation parameters be adjusted as essential tremor progresses? So we already talked about the fact that you can change the stimulation amount. The patient can do that themselves, but then at some point, you can also reset the device too and reset the task. So if you feel like your tremor is getting worse, you can still use that. How would you do that in combination with drugs maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like you said, a lot of times, tremor does change over time. And we know that, even when it comes to things like deep brain stimulation, you always have to kind of continually manipulate and try to find that sweet spot. And that's similar with this as well. And I think you can, time your medications with the therapy. I think that would be a great way to kind of augment the two. So if you have a good response to, say, topiramate or propranolol, I think timing it with, your device, the 40 minutes that you're taking medication, the 40 minutes that you're using the device, I think you could potentially augment the activity of both and really produce a significant improvement in tremor and a much better quality of life.
Absolutely right on spot. When we talk to patients in our customer success department, 40-minute session is the standardized session today, and it's task specific. So if you think about it, in the study, people had to use the device twice a day, but if they could choose when those 2 times in the day were. And so when you think about it, in the morning, you're using it to kind of get yourself ready, and maybe you need to use it for a different specific task in the middle of the day or towards the end of the day. And then you got to think days of the week, because we have someone who is on our website and he loves to golf, and he uses it as he's getting ready to go golf. So this idea of longest duration, it's really just, you've got these 40-minute blocks of time, and then you've got this 90-minute block afterwards. And so once you start to get a feel for that, as clinicians, you kind of help them find their way about how to fit this into their lives, right? So that is actually the last question we have, and look at us, we are 2 minutes early. I'm really excited that we did this webinar today, and thank you very much, Drs. Coletta, Dr. Torres-Yagi, and Dr. Wallen. Dr. Wallen, please stay safe in that hurricane, and we will distribute the recording out to all of the people who registered. And thank you very much for joining us today. It was a great opportunity, and thank you for participating.